You are 15. You sit on a velvet chair too large for your frame, your back aching under the weight of brocade and expectation. The air smells of myrrh, candle wax, and a faint iron scent, like old coins left in the sun. Outside, bells are ringing. Not for death, not yet. They ring for your wedding. The man you are to marry is 54. He wears black from neck to ankle, mourning his second queen. Mourning, but marrying again. You are not a stranger to him. You are his niece, his blood, the daughter of his sister. You feel his eyes on you, not with hunger, not with love, but with a cold and careful reverence, as if you are a relic, not a bride, as if what you carry inside, your Habsburg blood, is more precious than the girl who bleeds it. Your mother is weeping, silently. Your father, his brother, is watching from behind the altar. His lips are thin. He does not smile. You don't understand why you feel so hollow. You've been told this is a great honor, that your womb will continue the divine line, that this marriage is not for you, but for God and empire. But somewhere deep beneath the lace veil and the golden crown, you are screaming. You wonder if anyone hears. When he takes your hand in his, the room falls silent. The priest speaks Latin that no one listens to, and when he lifts your veil, he does not kiss you. He simply nods, a monarch affirming property. And just like that, you become empress. But not the first niece to do so. He had done this before, and he would do it again. History often whispers its darkest secrets through the lips of royalty, and some stories, like this one, barely make a sound. Welcome to Echoes of the Past, where we uncover the forgotten, the forbidden, and the quietly devastating truths buried beneath crowns and titles. If you're still with us, after that opening moment, I invite you to stay. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Tell me where in the world you're listening from and whether you'd ever heard this tale before. Because while the world remembers the names of kings, it forgets the cries of girls in golden cages. Today, we travel into the heart of one of Europe's most powerful and genetically doomed dynasties. A story of blood that demanded more blood, of uncles who married their nieces, and of an empire so obsessed with purity, it slowly destroyed itself from within. This isn't just about one emperor, it's about the cost of worshipping lineage above life. Let's begin. To understand why an emperor could marry his niece not once, but twice, you must first understand the world that crowned him. This is the 16th century, an age not only of empires and wars, but of mythologies dressed as statecraft. A time when kings did not merely rule by the sword, but by divine right, a belief that their blood was chosen by God himself. And no family embodied this belief more fiercely than the House of Habsburg. Spanning from Austria to Spain, from the Netherlands to Naples, the Habsburgs did not merely claim power, they curated it like a sacred relic, and like any precious artifact, they believed it must be protected from contamination. That meant keeping outsiders out, which meant keeping marriages in, within the family. In Habsburg Spain, the crown did not merely pass through conquest or council, it passed through blood. The closer the kin, the more secure the throne. And so, the family tree began to fold inward, looping back on itself like a snake devouring its own tail. It wasn't subtle. One Habsburg married his niece, another married his cousin, another still married both. Over generations, this created a maze of unions so convoluted that by the time our emperor was born, His pedigree resembled less a tree than a spider's web. And the emperor? He was born into this doctrine not as a questioner, but as its most devout disciple. From infancy, he was told, "Your blood is holy. Your duty is to keep it that way. Love is irrelevant. Desire is dangerous. Loyalty to your blood is loyalty to God." At court, this ideology shaped everything. Portraits of royal couples looked more like mirrored siblings than lovers. Children played not with toys, but with future spouses who also happened to be their cousins. The church, too, played its role. Technically, canon law forbade marriages between close blood relatives, but the papacy, ever political, routinely granted dispensations, especially for kings, especially for Spain. Priests who blessed these marriages rarely questioned them. Doctors who saw strange deformities in royal births whispered, then went silent. Nobles who opposed such unions found themselves exiled, or worse. The system sustained itself through silence. But even as this machinery of lineage turned smoothly on the surface, something deeper was beginning to crack. Quietly, over generations, the genetic consequences of inbreeding began to reveal themselves, not in scandals, but in skulls. Babies born with jaws that wouldn't close, tongues too large to speak, fragile bodies, epileptic fits, miscarriages, madness. They called it the Habsburg jaw, a protruding mandible so exaggerated it became a symbol of the dynasty itself. But this was not simply a cosmetic quirk. It was the mark of a bloodline slowly collapsing in on itself. And yet the royal answer was never to stop. It was to double down. Which brings us to our emperor. A man raised not to question, but to preserve. A ruler taught that marrying his niece was not only acceptable, but virtuous. And so he did. Twice. He was not the first, and he would not be the last. But what set him apart was not merely the repetition, or even the closeness of the ties. It was the blind, unflinching faith in a system that was already beginning to rot from within. The world around him was changing. Science was emerging, whispers of heredity and health beginning to circulate. But he did not hear them, or perhaps he chose not to. To him, purity was power, and nothing was more dangerous than letting it slip away. His court remained loyal. His subjects remained silent. His family remained compliant. But the cost of this silence, of this myth of divine blood, would echo far beyond his reign. And the child born from his final union would carry the full weight of this legacy. Not in titles, but in tragedy. He was born under the weight of 1,000 portraits. Each ancestor stared down at him from the palace walls. Saints, warriors, kings, each one a mirror of the last, and each bearing the same name, the same jawline, the same blood. From the moment he first opened his mouth, nurses whispered prayers that his tongue would not be too large, that his breath would be even, that he would not be like some of the others. He passed the test. He was strong, intelligent, and most of all, obedient. As a boy, he watched his father rule with a sense of sacred distance. His father rarely laughed, rarely ate with the family, rarely touched anyone. But he prayed, constantly, and he mourned even more. His mother died young. His father remarried his niece. It was the first time he witnessed what would become his own pattern. As a teenager, he was taught the science of empire, geography, theology, diplomacy. But nowhere in his education was there room for doubt. He learned that enemies came not only from foreign lands, but from impure blood. That illness was not always a matter of contagion, but of corruption. The solution? containment. Marry within. Keep the blood clean. He believed it. Why wouldn't he? Every painting, every sermon, every marriage contract reinforced it. To question it would be to question God, and kings do not do that. His first marriage came early. She was his double cousin, related to him on both sides. She was gentle, pale, devout. They had children. Some lived, others died early. One had fits, another never spoke. But still, he believed. When his wife died, he mourned. But not long. The court whispered it was time to remarry. And who better than his niece? She was young, just 15, barely bled. Her mother, his sister, wept, but not publicly. The marriage was arranged swiftly, as if to avoid second thoughts. The church approved. A papal dispensation was granted, with ink that barely dried. She arrived by sea, cloaked in lace and nerves. When he saw her, he noted her resemblance to himself. She had the Habsburg chin, the Habsburg stare. It pleased him. They were married in a grand cathedral. Nobles applauded. The crowd cheered. But in her eyes, there was only terror. She did her duty. She conceived quickly. But the baby did not survive. The second child came weak, frail, born with seizures. The third, stillborn. He never wept. He prayed. She, however, began to fade, quietly, withdrawing from court, whispered to tapestries, feared mirrors. When she died, still in her 20s, some said it was her heart. Others said it was the silence that killed her. Again, the court murmured, he must remarry. Again, the options narrowed. Another niece, daughter of his brother, barely 13. He agreed. It was not lust, not romance. It was doctrine. By now he had convinced himself this was righteousness. She did not understand the contract she was entering. Her dolls were still in her chambers when she left. On the wedding day, her hands trembled so badly she could not hold the ring. She bore him a son, Charles. At first, he was thrilled. An heir, a triumph. A sign, perhaps, that the bloodline was finally secure. But Charles was not like other children. He cried constantly. His tongue was too large for his mouth. He couldn't chew properly. His jaw jutted forward so severely that he drooled when he tried to speak. The doctors blamed bad luck, but behind closed doors, they called it what it was, consanguinity. The emperor did not hear them, or refused to. He loved Charles fiercely, but from a distance, rarely touched him, rarely spoke of his condition. As Charles grew, his afflictions worsened. He suffered seizures, chronic infections. He could not read. He could not walk without aid. And yet, he was crowned heir. Because who else could it be? In his final years, the emperor spent more time in chapels than in court. He commissioned new portraits of himself, of his wives, of Charles. He made sure they all looked regal, healthy, holy. He died with a rosary in his hand and a prayer on his lips. He never once acknowledged what he had done. The court wore black, the bells tolled, and Charles ascended the throne. He would be the last of the Spanish Habsburgs. We like to think we've moved on. We no longer believe in divine bloodlines. We marry for love, not politics. We put science before superstition. But some things linger. We still chase purity in names, in nations, in stories. We still protect legacies, even when they rot. We still build families on silence, on duty, on the illusion that certain people were born more right than others. And we still look away when those illusions harm the vulnerable. Charles II was not a monster. He was not cursed. He was a child born into a system that valued lineage over life. A boy whose body carried centuries of decisions he never made. And that system, however distant it feels, still echoes in ours. Whenever we defend tradition without question, whenever we preserve power through exclusion, whenever we label someone unfit because they do not look, speak, or move like we expect. History is not just about kings and queens. It's about the choices we repeat and the silence we inherit. So perhaps the question isn't how the Habsburgs collapsed. Perhaps the real question is, what are we still keeping in the family? And what will it cost us? We like to think we've moved on. We no longer believe in divine bloodlines. We marry for love, not politics. We put science before superstition. But some things linger. We still chase purity, in names, in nations, in stories. We still protect legacies, even when they rot. We still build families on silence, on duty, on the illusion that certain people were born more right than others. And we still look away when those illusions harm the vulnerable. Charles II was not a monster. He was not cursed. He was a child born into a system that valued lineage over life. A boy whose body carried centuries of decisions he never made. And that system, however distant it feels, still echoes in ours. Whenever we defend tradition without question, whenever we preserve power through exclusion, whenever we label someone unfit because they do not look, speak, or move like we expect. History is not just about kings and queens. It's about the choices we repeat and the silence we inherit. So perhaps the question isn't how the Habsburgs collapsed. Perhaps the real question is, what are we still keeping in the family? And what will it cost us? Thank you for staying with me through this quiet tragedy. Not all stories leave behind ruins or revolutions. Some leave behind a name, spoken softly, sometimes mockingly, often forgotten. Charles, the boy who became king because no one else could. The man who never had a choice. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. It helps us bring more forgotten voices into the light. And I'd love to know, have you ever heard of Charles II before? Of the Habsburg spiral into silence? Let's talk in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what echoes this story stirred in you. Do you see traces of it in today's world? In families, in power, in the things we call destiny? This has been Echoes of the Past. Until next time, listen closely. Some histories don't scream. They whisper.